introduce Anissa Moeine, who is a founder, or the founder, and Chief Executive Officer of Goldstar Education. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. Can you hear me okay? Thanks. So I'm going to be talking about a new framework. We're going to get a little bit nerdy here, but I hear that some of you are academics, so that's nice. But I'm going to try to keep it interesting and also short, and leave time for questions because I'd love for it to be as useful for you as possible. So Gold Star Education is an initiative that I started because there's a lack of clarity around what EdTech works. So we have a situation where buyers right now of EdTech are bombarded with products. There's so many products in the market, it's difficult to distinguish one from another. So Hull and IQ's most recent statistics are that there's 80,000 EdTech companies in the world. And then there's more products than that, and that's the minimum. And basically, so you have thousands of companies, thousands of products to choose from, a situation where we want to modernize and choose the right ed tech. But how do you decide and how do you know who to trust? And so this question of can we trust that the ed tech product will work for us is at the forefront of everyone's minds, especially when you're making a decision for your district, for your country, for an entire region, for a university, for many students. It's a large responsibility. And so how do you make that decision? Um, what Gold Star, this initiative, is doing is basically um, trying to clarify what EdTech is trustworthy. So we need a clear mark for the marketplace of trustworthy EdTech. And how do we do that? So the challenge comes from these two conflicting factors in education. First is that we want proof that our products work. We want to do trials like we do in medicine. We want to know that the trial that we did on a vaccine, for example, is showing that that product is ready for market. But if we were to get a vaccine that's different from the version that the trial was on, we would be horrified. But in education, we have a product that we actually want the the company to understand what the actual context of the user is. So we want those companies to understand the unique needs, the abilities of the user themselves, and to be sensitive and agile enough to change it, whether it's translation, whether it's understanding what those students need, whether it's integrating with that university or that school system. So there are contextual factors that we want the customer to um, we want the company to be able to customize for that customer and that learner. But then what do you do? Because you don't have the same version of the product you did the study on. You almost never have the same version. So unlike the vaccine where we did the trial and we gave that version, we have an issue where we have these two conflicting factors. So basically, what happened was that I did a study at UCL, at the Institute of Education, about 5 years ago. And the study was all about identifying better metrics to evaluate EdTech. So, how do we do that? How do we approach it? And it was on the sample that I started with was the UCL's Educate Accelerator, which was accepting 275 edtech businesses at the time, small to medium-sized startups. And we actually, the program did was teach businesses how to prove their products work, so build research capacity in the businesses. And what we were able to do was then look at the sample and say that those trustworthy businesses that were able to prove their products work, what factors did they have in common? What superpowers did they have? So how can we trust these businesses? What are we looking for? And the results were groundbreaking because they were very different from the way that we've approached looking at trusting a tech. Basically, what the results said is that there are these 6 superpowers that tech startups have that we can look for in order to trust that they will continue to build products in a insightful way and in a trustworthy way. And so I'm not going to go into the 6 superpowers unless you have questions about what they are specifically. I'm going to talk about the model overall, and say that briefly, it is a holistic approach to looking at edtech product validation. So we're not just looking at the efficacy data of the product in a moment in time, though we are also looking at that. This new model considers the processes, the mindsets, the capacities, and the assets in the enterprise. We look at the leadership team, we look at the people behind the product as well to make a judgment on whether that product is trustworthy and whether it makes sense to join a partnership with that company if you're going to trust them for your school, your universities, or your learners. So a summary of this model is basically efficacy data of the product in a moment in time, plus these superpowers of the companies equals the level of trust that I would give to that edtech product. So what the Gold Star project did was make this framework accessible. And so what we've done is create an assessment tool that is able to measure the trustworthiness of edtech products so that when you are ready to purchase, you don't have to use a framework yourself and go and question and figure out, because it's quite a large, extensive framework. There's different elements to it. And so Gold Star's created that into a product that is essentially a survey that's sent out to the entire leadership team of the edtech company in order to answer questions about that product and its efficacy. And so the leadership team behind the product, myself, we have who I did my PhD on this new model. And then we have Professor Alison Clark Wilson, who's the education lead, who's been an edtech researcher for many years. We have a tech lead who actually worked in data security and forensics for many years and is able to build a very secure system that companies can feel comfortable with sharing their information, and that it's going to be totally secure. And we have Professor Rose Luckin, who's the chief advisor. She was the mastermind behind the Educate program and has been one of the foremost scholars in AI and education for years. So Gold Star process is as follows. We do an assessment, which it was very important for me coming from a business background. I was an entrepreneur before coming to the business world and was very interested in how do you know that edtech products work when it's not obvious. The other products that I built were in media and telecom. I built products that were similar to their TV streaming, similar to Netflix, BBC iPlayer. For us, it was always very obvious when the product wasn't working. But in education, when the product is changing, when the learner might come to the conclusion that they're just not good at math or they're not so good at Italian, that's why it's not working. Not that there isn't data back and the product is not being built with the learning sciences in mind and with the right team. And so I was really interested in how do you make this framework, but then how do you translate it into something that's doable for businesses? And for those people that want to buy a product, how can it be fast to know this assessment? And so the idea with the assessment is that it's very fast. The system sends it out to the entire leadership team, and then and it's a 45-minute questionnaire that each leadership team member needs to answer. Then the system itself will score based on who the leadership team member is. There's different weightings. There are certain factors that they all need to be on the same page on, other factors that there's just somebody that needs to know it in the company. For the academics in the room, the model that was used is distributed cognition, which was modeled after pilots in a cockpit. And the idea there was that the pilot doesn't know everything about flying the plane. Some of the knowledge of flying the plane is actually in the assets in the airplane itself. And the pilot knows which buttons to use in order to make the plane go. And then there's people on the ground that the pilot also speaks to, and they depend on their co-pilot. And so there's the knowledge of how to fly the plane successfully is actually broken up into a team, and combined with the processes, the assets in the plane, and the actual pilot's knowledge and experience. We are looking at a combination of these factors when we're validating the product, which includes the knowledge and the assets in the enterprise behind that product. So we give a score based on each of the 6 superpowers, along with the report that explains each of those different elements, how that product is doing, and then an overall score. If you are a university, if you are buying for a district, we wouldn't recommend that you purchase a product that has less than an A overall score. If you're interested in partnering with that company and helping them to grow, which is why we have all the support services around that to help those companies to grow into these superpowers and to be more trustworthy in the market. Then you can choose a company that might have a lower score, but then to develop those superpowers. Every superpower is we're able to build them out and develop them. Nothing is something that is based on personality or based on an unattainable element. This is all about being formative and teaching how companies how they can develop these superpowers and become trustworthy in the marketplace. In the end, the idea is to have a gold star to make it really clear to the market what products are ready for purchase. And for those of you who might have startups or are interested in helping out startups on this journey, we have a light assessment, which thanks to COVID, we're calling the lateral flow version, where the full assessment is like the PCR. And so this one, it has less questions. It takes about 30 minutes to answer versus 45 minutes. There aren't as many open-ended questions. It's multiple choice. It's an honor system. Our research team doesn't look at the questions, and there's an instant result. It's much more accessible, faster, less expensive, and and companies will get a score to help them on that journey. And so if, for example, in your procurement process, you're interested in looking at certain companies, you can ask them to already do this to see if it's worth it for them to come into the process for you. And larger universities would look at this and get the full assessment if they were ready to choose between products before making a large investment. There's a lot of research behind this product. I put some of these here, and you could go to goldstared.com to look at the research and the model behind it. And if you want, you could read a whole doctoral thesis as well. And so that is basically the brief presentation. I'm just going to leave it open to questions if there's anybody that wants to ask in the room or outside, and very happy to go through any questions that you might have about this new model.
Okay. I'm not seeing any questions on the chat. Can I ask whether there are any questions or comments in the room? And while people are thinking, I think it's really important because most of the leaders in both schools and are seeing new things, new products, very quickly. And what basis do they make decisions? And the thing that makes the huge more time normally huge amounts of and to have somebody help them to find in the product or not is but are there any more comments in the room? We have one there. Could you come up to it still? Yeah, the trouble is people online. So I'm afraid we are limited to this.
What is the people? I cannot see them. No worries. Did you and
Can you please stand in front of the microphone? We
can
can't
you
hear
talk
the
about the
audio.
results
There
of
you go.
implementing it, please? Thank you.
So the framework has been turned into these two products. So there's the Goldstar full diagnostic tool, and there's a Goldstar light version. That's the result is almost like a full, if you think of it as a PCR test and a lateral flow test. So there's these two versions. The main one, the diagnostic version, is being used by larger purchasers or investors of products. So investors will come to us and ask to get an assessment to see if what the product looks like and what they need to help companies on. So a lot of times, especially early stage investors, will look at the company and say, that they really believe in the idea, the team, and would love to help them to build out those superpowers strategically. So we give them the report, and they're able to help to build that out. And that's for us really important, especially for me coming from a business background, to empower businesses. So the idea is to get everyone and to help them to get to the gold star. We're talking to universities now for their procurement process. And I know that that looks different in different countries. Here in the UK, the procurement of the universities that I'm speaking to is quite stringent. There needs to be justification for why certain products are chosen. It's very obvious in annual reports how much is spent on edtech and why those, and if those products are not used, or if they quote unquote fail for their purposes, then sometimes the decision makers behind those products are asked why. And it's a very uncomfortable process to fill out that procurement and also to justify. And so this is, again, a service that we provide to procurement processes. We're also talking to different platforms about making the gold star as a separate filter for edtech products in databases and in platforms, so that it highlights for buyers those companies that have taken this step to show that they are trustworthy. And so, and also we're talking about making one step before that, which is to put a filter for companies that start the process. So whether or not you've achieved the gold star, which is not an easy thing to do, there needs to be some work and some strategy behind it, which is why we provide support as well to companies to do that. And we also point companies to different partners in their region that can help them to build out those superpowers. And so we will also be creating a gold star on a mark that companies are on their journey to getting a gold star, that they've started their assessment and that they are working towards it, which is, again, a really important thing to note, because it's a journey to become at this level of trustworthiness. It's a really stringent model. We're looking at a lot of different factors. And the idea is to also be formative and to be informative to companies about what needs to be developed in order to be trustworthy.
Would you like the podium? I'm sorry about
David, we can't hear you when you're on the side. There you go.
which is terribly unjust, given that this is would you like to put your question?
It's fascinating that you're developing a diagnosis tool with the kinds of change that we need to be able to speed up the process and evaluate how we are learning, how we learn about learning, how we transform it into. I wonder how do you, I don't have the next slide, but how do you move forward in terms of developing the diagnosis tools itself? Because there's so much development in neuroscience, in research around learning. So some things we believe were conducive to learn. Now we know that, like, we have to change certain things about the models that we have had in the past. So not only we're evaluating, but probably we're rethinking what those values might be. Could you tell us more about how do you change? Because I think learning is just like, when you put a computer to do some of the things that anything does is one line. Another thing to say, can you think for yourself and assist us to the patterns we never seen before?
Yes.
Tell us more.
So a lot of what we're, now I can see. Hey, everyone. So a lot of what we are doing is looking at proofs companies that they have. And so we have to also make sure that our proofs, that we maintain our own goals. And one way of doing that is that we have a close affiliation with UCL, with the Institute of Education. I'm still a fellow at the university, not something I expected to continue in academia. I came to answer this question of better metrics. And I thought that I would only go back to the business world and build edtech. But I've realized that actually it's a journey that you always in education have to continue with that research and continue. So we have one foot in academia. Our team are all academics, very lucky to have our educational lead, Professor Elsa Clark Wilson is an academic in the Institute of Education, and the tool itself is built for continuously learning. And so there's a term that's being used a lot right now is instrumenting your tools. We have the ability with EdTech to build in the data that's really relevant to us so that we can continuously look at that data and to review the efficacy of our tools. And so that's what we are continuously looking at, the data points inside our product to keep bettering that and to make sure that we're instrumenting it in the right way. So there is a continuous logic model of the efficacy of our tool applied with a team that is paying attention to that and has a level of rigor with that. And of course, we publish on it as well, which is something that then we're able to be held to a level of peer-reviewed scrutiny as well. But you're right, it is an exciting space and there's a lot changing all the time. We have to make sure to be on top of it.